Welcome to Web Development Lesson 9.1. In this video, we're going to explore how to analyze classes, specifically classes that were created for web development. So let's get to it. So as part of web development, it's often nice to have some cool components such as a modal window, a flip card, a collapsible section, or even a gallery. Now, borrowing some inspiration from W3 Schools, this is what a modal window looks like. You click on a button and a pop-up comes up that kind of takes over the screen. It's a great way to provide additional information without using up more real estate on your web page. In order to make that happen, somebody would have to code this particular HTML along with this CSS and some more JavaScript to go with it. A lot of code just to get one piece of functionality in there. And let's say you have a couple of modal interactions. Again, this could definitely cloud the logic of your web page. Now let's explore a flip card. A flip card, like as it implies, allows you to provide some extra information by simply putting your mouse over a particular card or clicking on it, and it flips over to information on the back side. Similar to the modal window, again, there's a lot of HTML, CSS, JavaScript associated with that. Lastly, borrowing the inspiration from W3 Schools, sometimes you want to have a collapsible section where if you click on a tab, it opens up to more information. Again, a great way to be able to allow the user to specify how much information they want to see on a web page at a particular time. Again, all these solutions require HTML, CSS, JavaScript, which again, it can be daunting. But through the use of classes, and now we're going to head on over to our Replit example, we can hide the implementation of that logic from the programmer. Now, one thing to note that in the end, the work has to get done. So yes, the HTML has to get done, the CSS has to get done, and so does the JavaScript. But from the programmer's point of view, and you'll see that here in a second, when we actually try to instantiate objects from these classes, again, it becomes very simple because the classes are doing the work and the work has been done for you. So I'm going to go up to the very first one, the modal window. And if you recall, classes consist of behaviors and properties. The properties are essentially the variables, and the behaviors are the functions. Now, there's one particular function that's useful to us when we go to create an object from a class, and that's the constructor function. It tells you what it needs in order to create an object from that class. Now, one thing that might be useful when you explore, analyze classes is that, again, you're not responsible for the implementation. The implementation has been done for you for that particular class. So what you could do, you can hide the code and focus strictly on how you will interact with the class, which is typically through its functions, its behaviors. And as I mentioned, classes typically have a constructor, which lets you know how to create it. And it happens to be that for these particular classes that were developed as part of this video series, they all have a render function, which will allow you to take that modal window and place it somewhere on the screen as long as you provide the ID to the container of where it goes. And again, you'll see an example of that here in a second. You will also know that the gallery has a couple of extra features. It has a next and a play button. So let's head on over to our JavaScript and let's see how this works. So let's create a simple modal window. So we'll say maybe modal 1 is equal to new modal. Recall that in order to create an object from a class, you use the word new followed by the class name. Now the next thing it needs, going back to our class, looking at the constructor, is that it needs some text and some content. All right, so we'll keep it simple. We'll say click me. For the text, and the content will simply be hi there. Now this simply just creates a variable to represent a modal window. We have to actually put it on the page. And for that, in these classes, there is a render function that accepts a container. So let's take a look at our HTML for a second. And we can see here that we have a modal 1, modal 2 containers, we have a flip card container, a collapsible output container, and a gallery output. So I kind of kept the name simple for these output containers. So this is modal 1. And let's see what it does. All right, so here's our modal button. And if we click on it, here's our modal window. Now this one doesn't look too impressive, mainly because the fact that there's so little content being displayed in the modal window. It almost seems not useful to use it. But for the next example, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of this information that's up here. So we're going to create a modal window where we're able to display this HTML in the modal window when the person clicks on, let's say, this particular image. So let me just copy that. Let's go here. Let's create another modal window, another modal variable, so new modal. And in this part, what we're going to do is we're going to provide the, and let me do this as a string interpolation, just so we don't have issues with the quotations. All right, so they're going to click on this picture, and we're going to display the information that's in the Hulk variable, which is this HTML. Now, just as before, let's do a modal 2.render of modal 2. And let's see that in action. All right, so here's the image that we're able to click on, and here's the modal window. Now, this seems a little bit more impressive in terms of what you're able to provide with the modal window, and that's the whole idea, is that instead of providing that paragraph as part of the web page, we allow them to click on the picture to provide more information. Now, you can do even more information with this. You can provide videos, a gallery, whatever you want, links. This modal window will accept any HTML you've learned so far. So let's move on down to the next class, which is a flip card. So we'll do the same thing here. Let's say flip1 is equal to new flip card. And let's just take the same examples that we've looked at with the modal window, which is the simple text. And just like the modal window, it has to be rendered. And in this case, I think we had flip card output. Let me verify that. Yeah, flip card output. All right, so here's our flip card. Now you notice that it's taking up the whole area. It seems kind of silly. Again, that could be handled with a little bit of CSS on the HTML side. Because if you recall, this particular example had two specific containers that were cards to a container. So that's how I was able to split it half and half. But you will notice something nice when you start adding more cards. So let's add another card that has a little bit more information than just text. So let's say flip2 is equal to new flip card. And at this point, we're going to take the second example we used for the modal window, which is the idea of having an image, having an image, and then on the flip side, excuse me, on the flip side, we have that HTML content. So let's take a look at it. Now you'll notice that the flip cards definitely look a lot better this time because there's two of them on the page and they're split in the real estate. So I click on the first one, it kind of flips. I click on this one, and then this definitely looks better of having the image here, a little paragraph, it could flip back over. Again, we're providing a lot of information in the same amount of space. All right, so let's see another, one of the other components from our components.js, our classes, and that's going to be a collapsible section. So I'm going to say new collapse. And I haven't been doing this, but just to kind of reiterate, if you ever forget how to instantiate, create an object from a class, simply go back to the source, look at the constructor, and it'll tell you. It's looking for some text and some content. So I'm going to do the same thing here. We're going to start off with the example of just a hi, click me and a hi there. And let's go ahead and render this. Let's render this to the collapsible section, collapsible output. collapsible. And then this time I'm just going to copy it. Let's do that. Let's check it out. And, oh, because this should be collapsible, not collapse. Let's check it out again. So this is what a collapsible section looks like. If I click on it, it opens up to hide there. Again, not very impressive because we haven't provided a lot of information. But in the second example, and for this, just to maybe speed it up a little bit, I'll do a little copy and paste here. We'll do collapsible 2. Let's put the word Hulk. So unlike the other two, it seems kind of weird to have an image on the tab, though you could if you wanted to. I mean, you're the developer. But I'm simply going to put the word Hulk. And I'm going to pass in that same Hulk content we've done with the other two components. And let's do a collapse2.render to the same area. So here we have the click me. We can open it to see that. And now when we click on the Hulk, we're able to open up the section that provides the paragraph and the image. Now, one thing to note, and you might have already kind of spotted it, one of the challenges with collapsible is that it does move the HTML that's around it when it gets opened up. And then when it collapses, it also kind of moves it. So something to know, and that can be a challenging experience for some users to have their web page move on them when they look for additional information. So just note that when a collapsible section opens up, it will move the HTML that's around it. All right, so for this next part, we're going to explore the gallery. Now, the gallery is a little bit different. The gallery just takes one piece of information and it happens to be an array of images. Now, we already created that up here. Here's a variable called Adventures, which has an array of images that have been stored in this particular folder. So let's go here. Let's create let gallery equal new gallery. And let's pass in that array of images. And just like in the other ones, we're going to have to render it to the web page using the render function. And this is output. Now, one thing to know, I've been using the render function. I don't want you to think that's something that all classes have. This render function is specific to these classes that were created as part of this video series. All right, so I think we're good. Cross our fingers. We're going to introduce. Okay, so here's our gallery. Now, by default, the gallery doesn't autoplay. So you have to click on the image to get to the next one. And that's usually a feature that's provided as part of a gallery, is the allowing the user to kind of go through the images at their pace. But I will say, though, if you do want it to kind of autoplay on its own, the gallery offers another function called play, which will do exactly that. It will autoplay the gallery. So let's see that. And there you go. Now, again, these classes were developed as part of this video series. If you do encounter these classes in the future, you might see some modifications as they're continually being developed. And you also might see some additional components that were created in this component.js class. And I can tell you right now, honestly, this gallery is definitely going to get improved a lot more in terms of what most people are used to, which is having some arrow buttons on the side and maybe little thumbnails at the bottom. So let's go back to our presentation and review what we've done. So we saw a method of analyzing classes where we focus strictly on just the functions, the behaviors of a class, because that's typically how you interact with a class. We also saw the power of working with classes in that they hide the implementation of the particular logic, the process that you're trying to do. Looking at W3 schools, we saw that a modal window, flip card, collapsible section, and galleries offer a lot of rich information in the same amount of space, but required some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in order to implement. Through the use of classes, we were able to create classes to mimic these web components and allow the programmer simply to instantiate an object from that class and then call the appropriate function to render it to the web page. So hopefully you're excited about using classes as part of your web development process and enjoy.